Everyday Life with Guardsmares, Chapter 17. Lily Glamorspear's point of view. This was the most frustrating fight Glamorspear had ever been in. Every time she relocated, Val seemed to find a new way to ambush her. Sit in the middle of the field? He'd break her line of sight by climbing up into the clouds or diving behind a hill or circling around one of the wooded areas. Then while she was going crazy trying to reacquire, he seemed to find the perfect direction to break cover and ambush her from. Again. If she took up a position at the edge of the field next to the tree line hoping to isolate his approach vectors, well, then he'd manage to cut through the forest itself, dodging trees to slam into her shield from behind. If a bunch of trees wouldn't stop him, how about using a thicket of bushes as cover? He couldn't blow through those, but he still found a way to sneak above or around them to strike. Regardless of where she took upon a firing position, the pattern remained the same. He'd struck and then retreated. She'd drop shields and launch a volley. He'd dodge the volley and break her line of sight. She'd grumble, raise shields, and relocate, and he'd manage to figure out exactly where she was and figure out a new way to sneak up on her. Wash, rinse, repeat. Not even the changeling invasion was this infuriating. Granted, the changelings were a lot more dangerous, and there were enough of them that it was actually a serious threat to her shield, but with just Val banging on her projected force field, he was clearly playing the long game, hoping to wear her out slowly. Or hoping that she would just make a mistake, like forgetting to raise it, allowing him to clobber her. The truth was that all the shooting and shield swapping was taking a toll on her. Glamorspear's reserves of mana were considerable, but not unlimited. But it was a mental frustration, not magical exhaustion, that was really wearing on her right then. Come on, Ice, she's sitting under that tree like a rotten apple full of worms! And Val's goon squad wasn't helping either. The only solace that she had at the moment was the fact that Honorbound had clearly won her fight. There had been a burst of gasps and horrified hooting from the spectator squadron, and then Lily saw Honorbound standing up without her opponent anywhere in sight. Running these battles simultaneously was still a good idea, but it looked like momentum had a role to play anyway. If she could get 1 or 2 rounds to connect with Icepone, things would look even better.
Wakey wakey, sleepyhead. Damn it.
She felt 2 hooves connect with the top of her shield, which now had the consistency less of a solid brick wall and more of a firm bouncy bubble. A tough bouncy bubble, but still. The bastard actually dove straight down towards her lone tree and found a path through its branches to strike at her from one direction that she had thought was safe. But he had made a mistake. She was so low to the ground that he couldn't translate that vertical descent into horizontal speed after his attack. He was accelerating away from her, but he'd started from an almost complete stop. It was the perfect time to strike. She took her time to line up the shot, then fired a satisfyingly long 8-round burst. Keeping him in sight, she watched her bolts travel towards him, and time seemed to slow down as they hurtled forward.
Come on, come on.
It didn't even look like he'd be able to dodge them. But just as they were closing in, Val suddenly rolled his body towards her and swiped out with his right forehoof. Glamorspear's jaw dropped. He batted the spear tips away with a sabot. The ultimate humiliation. Then Val gave a cheeky salute.
Oh, you tossing garbage my way, Lily baby? Oh, try harder next time. How?
Oh, Buck, she had forgotten to drop her shield before firing. The bucking thing had interfered with her own shots, slowing them down so that he didn't even have to dodge.
This bucked up bucking bucker bucked my bucking bullets!
Seething, she looked for a new hiding place. She had to get her head screwed on straight again, or else she'd keep on making mistakes like that. And then he'd really have her, which would put everything on Spark Shower. Now, Lily wouldn't say that she couldn't do it, but she'd rather not put her in that position. Besides, those bucking bastards deserve to be cleanly swept by our crew. Artemis Sparkshower's point of view. Right then, all Sparkshower could feel was the pulsing sound of her own heart pounding. Calculating that she was going to limit her counterattacks, Joker had started to repeatedly attack her from above, never quite striking long enough or hard enough that he would be forced to stay in her reach. Still, she couldn't let his attacks go unchallenged, and since she didn't know when, if ever, he was going to come in long enough to give her the chance to make a counterstrike, she decided to be proactive. That meant using alternating bank turns to climb and work her long spear for all it was worth, thrusting and slicing whenever Joker approached. She was keeping him at bay, and she'd nearly reached the cloud cover, but the effort had been exhausting.
Ooh, we're getting awfully close to those nasty-looking clouds now, aren't we? But don't worry, I'll make sure that we don't reach them.
At least dodging the considerable reach of her weapon had kept him mostly quiet until now. Beside the inevitable laughter and giggle every time he got a blow in, or narrowly avoided her own, of course. Twisting her head around as she changed tack to a left bank, Sparkshower craned her neck back to see what was coming next. This time he was opting to attack from outside her bank, and she'd readied her spear against his charge. But instead of striking her armor and tasting her spear, he dived low underneath her. It was all she could do to just relax her muscles as he blew through her lower wing, dislodging a few feathers as he went. All the strike really accomplished was interrupting her banked turn and dropping her a few hooves down. But attacking a fellow Pegasus's wing in a formal duel? That was beyond the pale, especially for a distinguished member of the Royal Guard. Or perhaps it was just an honest mistake. Maybe he dived only to avoid her spear at the last moment.
Oh, what's the matter, Philly? Everybody knows that dragons don't have feathers.
He was serious.
After all the terror that he'd caused her, was this fight just one big joke to him? As he circled around, Sparkshower banked over again to the right, keeping her thickly armored back to him. In Cloudsdale, deliberately attacking a wing was grounds to immediately halt a duel with a loss to the instigator. But they were so far up and away from every pony on the ground that it was doubtful that any of them would have seen that. Except maybe Glamour Spear with her fancy magnifying optics. If she was even looking their way. Which she probably wasn't. No, it was just herself. All alone up here with this
miserable, dishonorable, shameful excuse for a guard's pony.
She found that her fear of facing a formidable foe had been replaced with something else. Righteous anger. Glamour Spear was right. Valiant and a squadron were just a bunch of uncivilized thugs. Well, she knew just how to deal with that. It would mean taking even longer to reach the cloud cover, but by making sure to hold her wings lightly when he moved in to strike. Because of that, she could avoid him doing any serious damage. Tucking them in would be even better, but Joker moved so quickly that it would be too risky a proposition. If she tucked them in too early, she'd lose more altitude. If she tucked them in too late, her muscles would still be taut when he struck, and he might actually injure her. No. Keeping them loose was the best way to approach the engagement. And although Joker was sinking to despicable means, perhaps it was a good sign after all. After all, it was just as Drill Sergeant Mareline Tandem had taught her, way back in Pegasus individual armor training.
When an enemy decides to attack your wings, it's because they have given up trying to penetrate your armor.
Did that mean Joker was starting to give up? She sure hoped so. Honor Bound's point of view. Honor Bound was presently watching Specialist Glamour Spear fail. What's wrong, Corporal? She shook her head.
It's Glamour Spear, sir. I should have known that this would happen.
Beside her, the Royal Engineer was watching the air versus anti-air duel with concern. I can see that things don't seem to be going her way, but could you explain to me why? She turned up to face him.
Specialist Glamour Spear is used to working in a battery, sir. Her helmet doesn't have the magnification needed to keep track of Lieutenant Killfeather beyond her maximum firing range.
There was more shouting from in front of her, so she looked away from her VIP.
And all that galloping around she's doing is pointless, though I can see why she thinks she has to do it.
Out in the fields, Glamour Spear sent another failed volley after a retreating ice pone.
She needs some pony who can keep eyes on targets, to call it out, and to tell her when to shield and when to fire.
Over at the bridge, the Peanut Gallery chimed in on the latest exchange. Glam keeps throwing out the spam.
Yeah, except this meat's gone rotten. Go ice, dodge that trash.
Squinting as she watched Lieutenant Killfeather make his way off into the distance once more, Honor barely noticed Anonymous's footsteps as he walked away from her. In 10 seconds, the Pegasus was completely beyond visual range. It was almost impressive that Glamour Spear had been holding it together so far. In her place, Honor would probably be going nuts by now. Excuse me, gentle colts. Over by the bridge, Anonymous spoke out loudly, and the remainder of Valiant's squadron all turned to face him. She hoped that he wasn't about to provoke something foolish. May I take it from your behavior that providing verbal support to the duelists is within the rules? Most of the Pegasi and both of the Earth ponies looked like they barely understood what he meant. The rest wore a look of disgust. Applewood, the one with a mustache, shot a glance to his compatriots before speaking up.
Yeah, sure, my lord. You go ahead and provide all the verbal support that you want.
Capital, Gentle Colts. My thanks. He was walking back Honor's way. Strange. Did the Royal Engineer expect to form a two-pony rival cheerleading team for Glamour Spear? Additional distracting voices were probably the last thing she needed right then. Anonymous pointed at her as he gingerly made his way down the embankment, heading towards the tents. Corporal, tell Glamour Spear to set up a firing position as close as possible to the road here, and order her to stay put. And that's when she realized that he wasn't heading for the tents, he was heading for the carriage. Maybe he had something back there to help out. God, I hope they know what they're doing, because if all three of them win, that is some satisfying shit right there. Now let's get on to our high-endurance donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, Gauntlet, and only one thing. Zar630, Strix, Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Pastel Skies, Magazine, Crazy Killer 557, Dospo, Madman Stan, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, Runeslife the 9852, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, McDoofus 456, and many more super unique people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.